The year is 1794. The French Revolution is a wildfire consuming Europe, promising liberty, equality, and fraternity through the razor-sharp justice of the guillotine. Its armies are a terror on the continent, but the nation itself is starving. A great famine grips the land, threatening to strangle the revolution in its cradle. Across the vast Atlantic, a lifeline is sailing towards them. 117 ships, a colossal convoy packed with grain from America. This convoy is not just food, it is the very survival of the new French Republic. But standing in its path, like a granite wall against the tide, is the single most powerful, most lethal fighting force on the planet, Great Britain's Royal Navy. The French know they cannot outfight them. So they devise a plan. They send their entire Atlantic fleet into the ocean, not to win a battle, but to become a sacrificial lure. Their mission: distract the British, occupy them, die if you must, but let that convoy pass. What followed was not just a battle, it was the first great bloody test of an entire era of war. And by the end of this, you will understand how one 70-year-old British Admiral, Richard Howe, used a single, audacious, rule-shattering order to not only annihilate the French fleet, but to forge a legacy of absolute naval supremacy that would leave its mark on the world forever. This is the story of the glorious 1st of June, and it begins with a chase. For the entire month of May, 1794, the British and French fleets hunted each other across the Bay of Biscay. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Ships were captured, small skirmishes were fought, but the two grand fleets never fully met. The stakes could not have been higher. For France, it was a matter of national survival. For Britain, it was a chance to deliver a knockout blow to the revolution by starving it into submission. Commanding the British fleet from his flagship, the mighty HMS Queen Charlotte, was Admiral Lord Howe. Known as Black Dick to his men for his grim and stoic demeanour, Howe was a veteran of the old school, a brilliant, fearless tactician who had learned his trade in the brutal wars of the mid-century. He was 70 years old, but his mind was as sharp and as ruthless as ever. He knew his mission: find the French fleet under Admiral Villaret de Joyeuse and destroy it. Villaret was a different breed, a young politically appointed officer of the new republic. He was a capable sailor, but his orders from the revolutionary government in Paris were absolute. The convoy must get through. He was to be the shield. He was to draw Howe's attention and, if necessary, sacrifice his entire fleet to ensure the grain reached the shores of France. The chase continued for weeks. Then, on the 28th of May, Howe's fastest ships finally caught the tail end of the French line. A massive French three-decker, the Revolutionnaire, was cut off and savaged by 6 British ships. The French vessel fought like a cornered wolf, taking immense damage before the fleet separated in the growing darkness. The first blow had been struck. It belonged to Britain. For 2 more days the fleet sailed in parallel, often just miles apart, completely blinded by a thick, oppressive fog. The tension was unbearable. Every man on every ship knew that when the fog finally lifted, a battle for the ages was inevitable. On the morning of the 1st of June, 400 nautical miles out in the Atlantic, the sun burned away the haze. The 2 fleets were there, just 6 miles apart, sailing in immaculate lines of battle. 25 British ships of the line against 26 French. The numbers were almost even. But Admiral Howe was about to do something that no one, not his own captains, and certainly not the French, could have ever predicted. For centuries, naval warfare had followed a strict set of rules. The 2 fleets would sail in parallel lines, firing devastating broadsides at each other until one side gave way. It was orderly, it was doctrine, and Howe threw it all away. He gave the signal for his fleet to do the unthinkable, to turn not alongside the French, but directly at them. Each British ship was to steer for its opposite number in the French line, smash right through it, and engage them from the other side, a position where the French guns could not easily fire back. It was a move of pure, calculated aggression. An order so audacious, so contrary to the established rules of war, that some of his own captains hesitated, confused by the signal. But for those who understood, it was a stroke of genius. At 9:30 in the morning, the French opened fire. Their gunners, in keeping with their own doctrine, aimed high, trying to shred the British rigging and disable their ships. But the British were different. The Royal Navy aimed for the hull. They were not trying to disable ships. They were trying to kill them. As the British line bore down, the ocean erupted into a storm of cannon fire. This was the moment of truth. One of the most ferocious duels was between HMS Brunswick and the French 74-gun ship, Vengeur du Peuple. The two ships became locked together, so close that the Brunswick's gun crews could not open their gun ports fully. It didn't matter. They simply blew them off, firing their cannons right through their own hull and into the enemy ship beside them. For hours, the two Titans battered each other into splinters. Lord Howe, aboard his flagship, steered the Queen Charlotte directly for the French Admiral's flagship, the Montagne. He raked the French ship's stern with a murderous broadside, sweeping its decks with cannonballs before pulling alongside to pound it into submission. The battle devolved into a series of brutal, individual, ship-to-ship duels. It was chaos, smoke, and thunder. But amid the chaos, the superiority of the Royal Navy's training and gunnery began to tell. The British crews could fire their cannons faster, more accurately, and with more devastating effect. French ships were systematically dismasted, their hulls shattered, their decks turned into slaughterhouses. By 1 in the afternoon, the fighting died down. The result was a spectacle of absolute destruction. The French fleet was a wreck. 6 of their ships of the line had been captured. A 7th, the heroic Vengeur du Peuple, battered beyond recognition by the Brunswick, sank beneath the waves. Not a single British ship was lost. French casualties were catastrophic. Nearly 4,000 men were killed or wounded, with another 3,000 captured. The British suffered just over 1,000 casualties. It was one of the most one-sided tactical victories in the history of naval warfare. The news of the glorious 1st of June sent a wave of euphoria across Britain. Admiral Howe became a national hero overnight. King George III himself travelled to Portsmouth to present the victorious admiral with a diamond-encrusted sword. The victory erased any lingering fear of a French invasion and seemed to confirm what every Briton believed, that the Royal Navy was invincible. But there was a bitter twist. While the battle raged, the precious grain convoy, the entire reason for the campaign, had slipped past unnoticed. It arrived safely in France, saving the revolution from starvation. In Paris, they hailed Admiral Villaret as a hero. He had lost the battle, but he had won the war. His fleet was battered, but his nation was saved. So who was the real victor? The answer lies in the battle's true legacy. Tactically, it was a humiliation for the French Republic. It proved that revolutionary zeal was no match for the cold, hard professionalism and centuries of tradition that powered the Royal Navy. It shattered the confidence of the French officer corps and set the tone for the next 22 years of war. From that day forward, the Royal Navy held a psychological edge that would carry them through to Trafalgar and beyond. The glorious 1st of June was a declaration. It was a statement of intent, written in cannon fire and splintered oak, 400 miles out in the cold Atlantic. It was the day the Royal Navy flexed its muscles and reminded the world that while empires and revolutions might shake the land, the seas still belonged to Britain. This event resonates with Britain's identity today, a reminder that bold, unconventional leadership and superior training can triumph, even against the odds. The ultimate takeaway is that this was more than a battle. It was the forging of a national myth, a moment that cemented Britain's command of the ocean for a generation. If you believe that the heroes and victories of British history deserve to be remembered, then join us. Subscribe to Indomitable History and ring the bell for more stories of grit and glory. But tell us what you think. Who really won on the glorious 1st of June? Was it Howe with his stunning tactical victory, or was it Villeray who sacrificed his fleet but saved his country? Let us know in the comments below.